Hey, what is going on, everyone? It's been quite some time, but I had a number of questions and a little bit of free time here, so I thought we would actually post a video again. That seemed to be a lot of feedback that I got on this particular topic. Talking about A.J. Brown and his contract with the Philadelphia Eagles and the possibilities of being released or traded. I think, as most people know, that relationship kind of went sideways this year. Statistically, he trended down. He seemed unhappy with the team. And, after a disappointing playoff exit, a lot of people are kind of questioning what his future is going to be in Philadelphia. So we'll kind of get into the nuts and the bolts of his contract here. For those that prefer a written format, I will try to get that online as well at overthecap.com, and you can check that out over there. Eagles contracts are always pretty complicated. So as you can see on the screen here, I'm just going to share everything in Excel. You could see that this is just a giant amount of bonuses over the course of this contract. So this is what this contract looks like, when it was signed in 2024. This was an extension that the Eagles had signed. In many ways, I would call this what's called a pacifier contract. Basically, you started to see a number of players around the NFL at this position get contracts that were averaging $30 million dollars a year or more. In many ways, those numbers were fake. But, as the numbers got up there, you start to get into a situation where a player that's on your team who's considered a top line receiver is going to look for that same kind of raise. And I believe at the same time, the Eagles gave a contract extension to Devonta Smith. I didn't go and look that up just on the timelines, but I'm pretty sure if I remember right, that was the case, which made him technically the highest paid receiver on the team, which obviously isn't going to fly. So that was how the Eagles kind of ended up in this contract that you see here. And as you go through this, the thing to look at here, just when we talk about from an Eagles standpoint of, did they or didn't they make a big mistake? If you look at the new money here, really over these first 3 years, A.J. Brown was originally under contract in 2024, 2025, and 2026 to Philadelphia. You can see they didn't really give him much in the way of new money, right? They didn't give him any raise in 2024. They gave him a $14 million raise in 2025. He took a little bit of a pay cut actually next year. So overall, they're only in for $12 million more than they were on the initial contract. Now, that also comes with a caveat. The other contract wasn't guaranteed. So it's not like they haven't given up anything, because they could have easily gotten out of these cash salaries that you see here. They weren't going to cut them this year, but these types of cash salaries that you see, those were not guaranteed. So, really what you're looking at is the additional money that they've kind of paid over that original kind of contract value, plus that guarantee number. So, it's not brutal, it's not awful, but I'd say it's still a mistake nonetheless. And it's just one of those things when you get into third contract receivers, it's just disaster waiting to happen. And I know there's always guys that you can point to and say, okay, that guy worked out. It's just a very big rarity. It's hard enough for the receivers in the second contract. When they get through that second contract, the third contract is really, really, really a bad deal. And I think Philadelphia kind of walked themselves into that to kind of try to cut off, an upset player. But at the end of the day, and this happens a lot, I think at this position in particular, what did you end up with? Pretty unhappy receiver who has a lot of guaranteed salary. So what you see here in 2026 is really what you're looking at. The numbers that I have in green are the numbers that are all impacting the 2026 cap in some way, shape, or form. So what you have here is his base salary, which is, the minimum 1.3 million plus a $250,000 workout bonus. Those are guaranteed. He still has prorations from a 2022 signing bonus, a 2023 option bonus, a 2024 signing bonus, a 2025 workout bonus that was guaranteed at signing, so prorated over 5 years, with that number starting in 2024. they got an insurance refund of some sort for games missed in 2024. There might be more coming. Who knows? You know, those insurance refund things, I never have any clue. Someone will usually just tell me about it sometime after the fact. So these numbers could adjust a little bit, but he hasn't missed that kind of significant time to where there would be any kind of major insurance refund, at least I don't think. He had a 2025 option bonus of 28.58 million. That is all consideration at this point. And then you've got a 2026 option bonus of 27.45 million. That is fully guaranteed. Doesn't mean they have to exercise it. It just means that that salary is fully guaranteed right now. So these are the numbers that you're looking at when you're really considering what the options are that Philadelphia has with this contract. You can see here, you know, they're trying to make this cap number as low as possible. That's why they're using this option bonus. So he has a salary cap charge of 23.393 million. The dead money that they have to account for at this point in time is 72.448 704. So $72.5 million they still owe on the salary cap for him. So that pretty much says there is no way they're going to release him this year. First of all, his salary is guaranteed. So it's almost like you're, you know, paying him that salary anyway. You know, whatever that number is here that I looked at before. What is it? 29? Yeah, 29 million. You know, you're paying him that money no matter what. Now, I never say, well, you don't want to chase, you know, you don't want to chase a bad contract, but it doesn't really get significantly worse. You can kind of control the flow of this contract however you want. And really the only thing that's at risk is in 2027, you see this little yellow marker here. If he's on the roster this March, he has $4 million guaranteed. I'll tell you right now, A.J. Brown would have to be so horrific in 2026 to where that guarantee makes any kind of difference to Philadelphia. Because he's going to get paid $4 million by another team. He's going to earn more than that just on name value alone. You know, the guy like Odell Beckham would sit out a year and he'd come back and make money. It's just the nature of, you know, the position and the star power and some team thinking that they can fix him. So it's a $4 million number that's there. They would get that money back in an offset. So I don't think that really matters to them whatsoever. So I don't see this regular release deal being a possibility. Really where you're getting at is 2027. So you stick with him. Well, what happens? Now you got a $53 million salary cap charge when you cut him. Of that, you'll get a $4 million credit the next year, most likely, because he would probably earn that. So, you know, your net on that is about 49 million. I would say this is more likely if they cannot find a trade partner. We'll talk about that in a minute. This is more likely going to be the escape point for them from this contract. All right, now, if they do decide to keep him for 2027 as well, you know, that'd be very surprising. Then you get into all these numbers here, which are not colored in because there's no guarantees on them. But if they were to keep him for 2027, they would exercise this option bonus. So you'd be looking at 47.4 million in dead money in 2028, 51.9 million if you get to 2029. And then if they make it all the way to the end of the contract in 2030, there's 53.52 million in dead money that's just sitting there. His contract voids out. These are all dummy years. So all of this just basically hits the cap at once. His contract expires, I think it's 23 days before the start of that league year. So it would just all kind of hit the salary cap. So, you know, that's really where they stand if they were to release him outright this upcoming year. From a post-June 1 standpoint, you know, you can make this work a little bit more. So if things go really bad, You can split that money up at 45.35 million this year. So what you would be looking at again is all this money in green. You'd be at this 1.3 million, this 250. You would be accounting for all of this stuff on the cap, okay, right here, and you'd be accounting for this entire thing as well because they would pay this out in cash. I mean, there's some alternatives that the Eagles could do, but most likely that's the way that you would be doing this. And you would defer $27 million to the next year. So that's I wouldn't really call that a possibility. I would say that's a possibility when you get into the season. If things have gone, crazy haywire, I think that might be a possibility. And really, if it goes into the season, these numbers are actually no. These numbers, no, the numbers would be a little bit different. They would actually defer more money to the following year because they would exercise this option. So they would defer, $20 million, $22 million to the next year. So you'd be looking at like 49 million in 2026, and his salary cap charge would basically stay the same for 2026. I'm sorry, you would be looking at the 49 for 2027. It would accelerate to the following year. So I would say that's a possibility. If they wanted to get things to go that far. When you get into 2027, and again, I think that is the more realistic time frame, you'd be looking at a dead money charge of 25.07 million. So you can see what that really consists of. When you do these releases, you are actually going to have to account for this option bonus here, even though it wasn't paid out because it's due after the release date. You'll account for that for this year, plus that $4 million guarantee. You can see that in the formula there. That would all count on the cap. The following year, you would get a credit for this 3.881 million. All right. So the next year's dead money effectively would be 27.977 million. And I've already said that he would probably get that $4 million paid, by another team. So it would offset. So I think really more you're looking at about 24 million, give or take a little bit, in dead money for that, plus the another four out. So, $20 million is your, I'm sorry, 24 million is going to be your effective dead money cost in 2028 if you go the post June 1 route. So you wouldn't really lose a lot of cap space versus what you have on the books now. And you would defer, that number to the next year. This to me is a very reasonable escape. So, I think 2026 goes off the rails. You maybe release him. I guess you could think about releasing him in season. I would say more likely you turn this into, let's just try to get through it, go home, and then we'll deal with it after the season. I think that's more likely to be the situation. You can look at these other years, but that's so far out there. But the June 1 is a possibility pretty much in all these times. Now, I included a June 1 for 2030, not because I expect them to get there, just because what the Eagles would do if they ever got that far is they would basically get him to agree to waive that void, and they would allow him to be cut in 2030, and that would split the dead money, as a possibility. So then you get into the trade situation. So let me just hide these so they can be a little closer. And we can probably look at these. So the trade situations are a little bit different. Regular trade is a trade that's going to happen anytime before June 1st, but basically would happen up to the draft. You get whatever you can for them. Your dead money that you would be looking at is $48.9 million. So your dead money at that point is going to be probably this, all of this stuff that's here. So the 2025 option, the workout, the 2024 bonus, 23 bonus, 22 bonus, and 1 year of that option proration for 2026. And you would get the following year a credit of 5.5 million. So, you're looking really, your net dead money on this is going to be about 43 million. But for this year, you would lose $26 million in cap room. Maybe somewhat doable. I think that's still a little bit high. as you get into 2027. You can see there's really not a good point for really ever doing a trade that would be before the draft. There's never like a where you would look at this and go, all right, like this really saves us a lot by really getting him out of here. It would really just be this 1 year. It would be 2026, where it's far better than the release. Everything else, because there's really no salary, guaranteed salaries involved. Um, there's no real benefit to it, and I doubt anyone is going to take him at that point in time, at least at these salary numbers. Um, if the Eagles are looking to cut him, right? If the Eagles are looking to get out and his cash salary is 21, means things really went bad in 2026. Now, a post June 1 trade, people have asked a lot about that. The post June 1 trade, there's no special designation by the NFL about a post June 1 trade. So if they were to trade him post June 1, what that means is they're going to trade him sometime after the draft. You're going to let things linger into the summer, and you're going to make a decision then about trading him. And more likely, this is going to be a scenario that would go into the regular season. That would be more my guess on it. But you would like to trade him before this option bonus is due, if you really want to trade him. Because if they do trade him in season, the Eagles would have paid that out, meaning the next year on that June 1, they would be responsible for all of this. All right. So if they were to just do a post June 1 trade before the option is due, all right, you can see here they are, their acceleration that they would be handling here would just be this amount minus this, because you're getting a credit on it. But if they do this after they exercise the option, you'd be looking at all of this then, which is 49 million dead. Again, can you do it? Sure, you can do that. But ideally, you wouldn't want to from a cap perspective. If you don't trade him before the season begins, you probably are better off trying to ride it out and then cutting him, designating him a post June 1 the following year. That probably makes the most sense for them. But, it's these are options that they can consider. Now, the Eagles' option bonuses are pretty funky. They don't do options that are due at the beginning of the league year, which is very typical in the NFL. The Eagles will give themselves the window to exercise the option to be anytime from the start of the league year all the way to basically the day or 2 days before like the start of the regular season. So really what that means is the Eagles have all summer long to sit there and try to trade a player, not have to worry about the big salary cap charge, because if this option didn't exist, right, his salary cap charge would be 25, whatever it is, $28 million higher, 27.45 higher, or they'd have to account for that. I'm sorry, that would be 22 million and change higher. But they by doing this, it's almost like you have a built-in restructure, so they can carry this low cap number all throughout the summer, and then trade him. And because the post June 1 rules apply, you're only looking at 22 million in dead money. So if the Eagles can find a trade partner, it absolutely makes sense for them to trade him in June, July, August. There's also other soft benefits to the Eagles to waiting for that time. While everyone always wants to have, that immediate gratification of a trade, right? You trade him now, you can get a draft pick this May or April, whenever the draft is. The reality is A.J. Brown's value right now is very low. He's coming off a bad year. He's really coming off 2 years. He was injured 2 years ago, so his numbers were down from that. This year was really the first year I think that you saw a big efficiency decline. Um, the age is into it as well. So I don't think teams that would acquire him would really be looking to give up a lot for him. I think they would look at this as a scenario where it's like, look, we're taking him off your hands, so you can save this $29 million in cash, right? It's almost like we're doing you a favor. So what's the value on that? A fourth round pick, a fifth round pick? I mean, I'm not sure. What that value might be. I'd have to go back and look at what. I don't remember what was Devonte Adams traded for. Um, I don't even remember. Third round, conditional. I think that's what that was. Um, so you would probably be looking at something like that. Maybe fourth round pick, maybe in a fifth round pick. Um, is what you would be doing. But if you wait until after the draft, I mean, it becomes easier to attach conditionals to it. Where maybe your value can come up based on his performance. So, I think there's a number of reasons why, besides the salary cap, if you're Philadelphia, you might like to delay it, until the summer anyway. Takes out that sting of not getting a lot for him and everything else, and then you move on. Similar scenario exists in 2027, and his salary does drop to 21. But like I said, I think if we're sitting here, and that's the situation we're in, I'm not sure if his value is going to be $21 million around the rest of the league. So I don't know if you would be able to really trade him at that point. But at least that does remain an option that they could think about. So I think from their standpoint, from a salary cap perspective, this makes a lot of sense to really push to see if they can do that this year, um, rather than waiting until next year, having to exercise this option and do everything else. Now, would a team want to acquire this contract? I think so. Really what you are looking at if you would be a team acquiring it is $29 million investment. Because again, I'm going to say that, that whatchamacallit money is not a big deal. The uh, $4 million, same scenario would apply as long as he doesn't retire. Someone will probably pay him that in 2027. So I think really it's just this 29 million. You'd be looking at a salary cap charge of just $7 million for next year, and if you kept the Eagle structure with all these options, you don't have to. You'd be looking at like 11, 17. This if they played the contract out. Um, but if you are a team acquiring him, you're really just looking short term at this. You're looking here at these 2 years. Um, so can you get value in 2026? And if you don't, what's that risk? The risk is a $7 million cap charge. Then the following year, um, you'd be taking on 25.96 in dead money. Again, I think you're going to get a credit on 4 million, so we can kind of take it off of that a little bit. Um, and I think that's kind of what you'd be looking at there. And I think that's a reasonable way to do it. Um, you know, if they wanted to do a post June 1 release, you'd be looking at 13.37 in dead money, and you would defer 12.589 to the next year. So, I think that this contract is manageable for another team. If another team that wants to acquire him has a lot of cap room, let's say it's a team like, I think the Chargers, right? They have a lot of cap room next year. Let me just check real quick. Salary cap space. I'm just thinking of good, like better teams that might want to consider acquiring him. Yeah, the Chargers, they have like 80 million. Seahawks aren't going to be interested. Jets, Commanders, Bengals, Rams, I think they're okay. Steelers, they went down that route. That was a mistake. Cardinals. Oof, man, not a lot of good teams here. Um, but anyway, the point is, if a good team takes him, they can actually decline this bonus that's here, and they can absorb all that salary this year. So, they could take a $29 million cap charge this year if they want to, and then, next year you would really just be looking at the $4 million in dead money, which I think you would really be getting back at that point. You could post June 1 at that point. You'd have a couple million in dead money, and then the next year you would get a credit on that. You'll only be carrying them at 5.4. That's if you kept this option in place. You can even remove that. So I think another team would take a flyer for 1 year at 29 million. Oops, that number is off because I have a ×5. Let's just throw that there in case anyone's looking. So I do think that a team would consider taking that on. Now, if the 29 million is too much, what might be a number that would work there? If we look at wide receivers that would fit that same kind of category, Devontae Adams got 22. So, I mean, that's not that far off. Now I know that there's some differences there, but, that's really not that far off. And I think, you could, again, you can come up with a scenario where the Eagles eat a little bit more. And if you're doing this after June 1st, again, you can kind of deal with that if you're the Eagles. Like, let's say the Eagles maybe get a better draft pick for it. Let's say they prepay $7 million on the contract or something like that. It's really not going to impact you too much. And, something like that might be worthwhile. Devontae Adams got 26 million guaranteed at signing. So I mean, I think it's one that another team would take a flyer on. So I think Eagles, it makes a lot of sense for them to let this go through the offseason, enter into discussions with teams, pretty early, but delay the whole process until after the draft. You might strike a deal before that time, make sure that team's not going to go, crazy in the draft with a wide receiver, something like that. But more likely, you're going to have those discussions post-draft. You have a team that, has a need at wide receiver. They didn't get one in free agency. They didn't get one in the draft. A.J. Brown might be the perfect player to kind of come in there and, lift them up a little bit. So I think that might be a scenario that works for Philadelphia. And it might work for another team as well. Again, whether the Eagles eat a little bit of money or not, these numbers make sense. If they can't find a trade partner, like I said, I think in my mind, it's too much. It's just too much to really take on when you're not chasing money anyway. It would be different if he didn't have salary guaranteed this year. If he'd say, wow, he's got $72 million in dead money, but if we cut him, we don't owe him anything. If we keep him on the roster, we owe him 29. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. As you look at 2027, for instance, even if you want to do a regular cut, you'd say, oh my God, we have $53 million in dead money. That's a ridiculous amount of money to have to pay, on your salary cap for a receiver. And you go, well, yeah, but your other option is, to keep him on the roster, pay him an extra $21 million, and still have $47 million the next year to account for in dead money, right? That becomes chasing bad money. But 2026, they're not chasing it. So they can slow play it. They can do whatever they want to try to make this work for them, make it work for him, make it work for another team. If they can't find another team, do the best they can to mend the fences and say, look, let's just get through this year together, and then, we'll see about next year. We can give you your unconditional release next year. You can choose a team. You can go sign a new contract with them. You can negotiate with them and make, another 25 million guaranteed. That's more than we were going to pay you at 21 million dollars on this existing contract. There are things they can do to try to make it workable. I don't know if it will work or not, but again, I think just from a cap perspective, if you cannot find a trade partner to trade with them in that window that exists from June 1st through, let's call it September 1st, I'm going to do what I can to make this work this year to avoid this kind of giant hit, this kind of stuff. And then I'm going to say this contract is way more manageable for me on my salary cap next year, where I can split the 25 and the 28, and then just move on that way. So in my mind, that's the way that Philadelphia should go. If you have any questions, post them in the comments. I'll try to take a look at them. And like I said, I will try to get a post up on this on OTC whenever I get the chance to do that in the next day or two. All right, thanks for tuning in. We'll see if I ever come back again anytime in the near future.